بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. Once Hazrat Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu went to a market and proclaimed to the people, "You are sitting here while the legacy of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam is being distributed in the masjid." The people ran to the masjid, but as nothing material was being distributed there, they returned disappointed. Hazrat Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu asked them, "After all, what was being done there?" They answered, "A few people were reading the Quran, and a few others were engaged in praising and glorifying Allah." He said, "This is what we call the legacy of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam." Once Hazrat Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu went to a bazaar, he went to a market, and proclaimed to the people, "You are sitting here while the legacy of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam is being distributed in the masjid." The people ran to the masjid, but as nothing material was being distributed there, they returned disappointed. Hazrat Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu asked them, "After all, what was being done there?" They answered, "A few people were reading the Quran, and a few others were engaged in praising and glorifying Allah." He said, "This is what we call the legacy of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam." Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi has mentioned many similar traditions. Even Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam has been commanded by Allah. Ayat of Quran, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم واصبر نفسك مع الذين يدعون ربهم بالغداة والعشي يريدون وجهه ولا تعد عيناك عنهم تريد زينة الحياة الدنيا ولا تطع من أغفلنا قلبه عن ذكرنا واتبع هواه وكان أمره فرطا. Allah commands Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, "O Messenger, keep the company of those who pray to Allah every morning and evening, who call upon Allah morning and evening, and they desire only His pleasure. And do not turn your eyes from them to the attractions and adornment of the worldly life. And do not follow him whose heart we have turned away from our remembrance, and who follows his desires, and therefore he has broken the limits of the true religion." Numerous ahadith indicate that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam used to thank Allah for producing such pious people among his followers that he sallallahu alayhi wasallam was commanded to keep their company. Numerous ahadith indicate that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam used to thank Allah for producing such pious people among his followers that he was commanded to keep their company. And in the same ayah, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam has been commanded to avoid the company of those who are unmindful of Allah, who are slaves of passion and trespass the limits laid down by Allah. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam has been instructed again and again not to follow them. Now all those who blindly follow the ways of the kuffar, of the disbelievers, the transgressors, the idolaters, and the Christians, and the other people in general, and are prepared to sacrifice 100 lives in following them, should search their hearts to determine the direction that they are moving in. A poet says, "O ignorant desert dweller, I fear that you won't be able to reach the Kaaba, for the path you tread leads to Turkestan." May Allah give us tawfiq to keep the company of such pious people. And one thing to remember is that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had been commanded to keep their company. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had been ordered to keep their company. So, no matter how pious or whatever we think that we are, But no one can be more pious than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. No one can have more deen in their life than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But even he had been ordered to keep the company of such pious people. So may Allah give us all the opportunity to keep the company of this, good pious people amongst us. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا سهم في الإسلام لمن لا صلاة له ولا صلاة ولا صلاة لمن لا وضوء له لا وضوء له ورجه بزار وحاكم عن عائشة رضي الله عنها. Hazrat Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu narrates that he heard Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam saying, there is no place in Islam for a person who does not perform his salat, and there is no salat without wudu. Hazrat Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu also heard Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam saying, without salat there is no deen. The position of salat in Islam is as the position of the head in a body. Hazrat Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu narrates that he heard Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam saying, there is no place in Islam for a person who does not perform his salat, and there is no salat without wudu. Hazrat Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu also heard Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam saying, without salat there is no deen. The position of salat in Islam is as the position of the head in a body. Let those who do not perform salat and not only call themselves Muslims but also boast of their being champions of the Muslim cause ponder over these words of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They dream of reviving the past glory of Islam, would not care to know how rigidly the people responsible for that glory stuck to the practice of Islam, so much so that the world was laid at their feet. Hazrat Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma suffered from cataract of the eye. People told him that the ailment could be treated, but he would have to miss his salats for a few days. He said, this is not possible. I have heard Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying, a person who does not perform his salats shall stand before Allah, while Allah shall be angry with him. So he said that he remembered, and when this was presented to him, he said, this is not possible. I have heard Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying, a person who does not perform his salat shall stand before Allah, while Allah shall be angry with him. Another hadith states that it is suggested that he perform sujood on a raised wooden platform for 5 days. So not that he missed his salat, but he, instead of bringing his head to the ground, there was a raised platform and he would not put the full pressure of his head down. So he refused to perform even a single rak'at in that manner. The Sahaba would rather go blind than to forego salat, though it is permissible under such circumstances, even for a few days. During Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu's last days, he bled continuously as a result of having been stabbed. He remained unconscious for most of the time. He passed on in this very condition. In spite of his injury, he was made conscious and reminded that it was time to perform salat. He performed salat in that very condition and would remark, there is no lot in Islam for a person who does not perform his salat. These days it is considered unkind and improper to induce the patient or even allow him to perform his salat. Our concern about a patient's well-being and comfort is in that he should not be inconvenienced by performing salat. We believe that fidya can always be given later. Sahaba radiallahu anhum understood concern and well-wishing to be in inducing a person to make ibadah, even whilst on his deathbed, without thinking twice, irrespective of his condition. So this is where we have to reach. Many times we hear from the youth that their parents never had any concern to wake them up for salat. They never gave any importance for Fajr salat. If it was time for school, they would wake them up. If there was time for something else, they would wake them up. But when it was time for salat, they did not bother waking them up. So what message did the children take? They took that the message that salat is not important. This is the message they took, that salat is not important. School is important, but salat, it's okay. Is this the message we want to be giving? Look, children's nature is that they'll understand things subconsciously. They'll understand things subconsciously. So if you tell them to do something and then you let it go once, twice, you tell them not to play with such a toy. You let it go once and they start touching it and they're inching towards it, and then they touch it and you don't do anything. Then second time they'll subconsciously understand that it's okay for them uh, to touch that. And until you lose your cool, then that means that that's the limit. They'll understand that. So in the same way, when we show that we don't have importance for salat, there's this thing that we say, we are not going to push our children to, you know, the men, they say, oh, we're not going to push our boys to keep a beard. We're not going to push our girls to, wear a hijab. We're not going to push our children to do, to read Quran or to make salat. We'll let them decide this on their own. But when it comes to school, no, 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 there's no options. You want to go, you don't want to go to school, too bad, you're going. Too bad, you're going. I don't want to go. No, you're going. So we've told them, the message we have given them is that school is more important than salat. Because there is no compromise in school, but there is compromise in salat. We want you to understand it. Rather, by encouraging them, not just being on their heads with a stick, but there has to be, there can be a bit of, pushing them, just like in school. But then there has to be a bit of encouragement too. So you push them to go to school, but then you tell them, when you grow up, then you're going to need this, you're going to need that. So it's not just that you're pushing them to school. Say, oh yeah, by the way, school means nothing for you. It means absolutely nothing, but you're still forced to go. That's not how it is, right? We'll push them to go to school, but at the same time, we'll tell them there is such and such benefits. It'll be good for you when you grow up. You will be able to do this. You will be able to do that. So we present them benefits. So same thing with salat. We should push them to it. We should make sure that they do it, but at the same time, we should encourage them. What are the rewards of it? What are the benefits of it? What has Allah promised for the one who performs the salat? Then they'll understand that it's something worth doing. So same thing, for all the commandments of Allah, we should push them to do it, but we should also back it up with some encouragement, because it is that important and it is, worthy that they should be acting upon it. And there's many things that we won't understand why it is until, you know, just like that, we're not going to understand what is the benefit. But we keep doing it anyways because it's beneficial, and down the line we understand. So same thing with these commandments of Allah. We might not understand up front, but we should always, we should have both these things that we should, for the children, we should be pushing them for it, and then we should be encouraging them, giving them the rewards, giving them some benefits, so that, we actually bring ourselves up to that level that Allah demands from us. And they should get this clear message that it is important. It is something to be done. It is something to be practiced. It is not just, you want to do it, you do it. You don't want to do it, you don't do it. No, there is a harm. There is a detriment in not doing it, but you just don't see it up front. But it is there and it is real. So we should not just let it pass like that. And then when we look at these people, Sahaba radiallahu anhum, how strict they were to the, holding on to the practices. This is what this reminds me of is a professional athlete. Professional athlete, he doesn't give up his little practices. He doesn't give up his diet. He knows that he has to stick to his diet. Everyone is eating junk, but he knows that he has to stick to his not so fun diet. And he feels like one day he doesn't feel like going for training in the morning, but he still goes anyways. He sticks to it religiously. He sticks to it religiously, and then from this type of an athlete, you hope to see results. With a person who goes Iverson style, practice. I don't need practice. Person who is not regular with his daily, you have there might be a superstar, but the rest, if they're not consistent, then they will drop. They will not be able to maintain. So likewise with us. May Allah give us tawfiq to bring these things into our lives, to come back onto the level of deen that was alive at the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and bring these same qualities that were alive in Sahaba's lives. May Allah give us the tawfiq to revive them in our lives as well. سبحان الله وبحمده سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. سلام क्या?
Assalamu alaikum.
अच्छा. So Khadija is saying Salaam alaikum. I'll convey everyone's salam back to Khadija. ठीक है. Salaam alaikum wa rahmatullah. Sheikh Abdul Rashid is giving you salam.